We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Paring Down. My name is Shannon Leyko. Wow. Do I have a podcast episode for you today? I feel like the last two guest episodes, this one and the one right before, have just knocked it out of the park. The guests have really been able to take highly sensitive topics and make them very attainable and accessible and gentle for all of you who are listening. And I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation today with Aubrey High of The Reclaimed Home. She is the first person I'm having back on the podcast as like a round two guest. Her episode that she did with me a year or so ago will be in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to that. But today we're going to be talking through if decluttering is only for those who are financially secure. I will let our introduction when we talk together on air kind of be a caveat. We give some, disclaimers about where we're coming from and that kind of thing. But I think you'll find this to be a really gentle and really inspirational conversation. So let me tell you a little bit about Aubrey herself. Aubrey is a mother of three. She and her husband are just about to celebrate 20 years of marriage. She and her daughter, Bree, are both certified organizational specialists and have a business called The Reclaimed Home. Through decluttering, organizing, and cleaning, they work with clients to reclaim their home so it can be a place of peace and healing. You are going to hear that she is so good at coming at this with such a heart for that healing aspect that decluttering can bring. And I just know you're going to love this conversation. So please enjoy my talk with Aubrey High of The Reclaimed Home. Aubrey, what a pleasure to have you back. My first repeat guest. It is so great to have you back.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, friend.
Of course, because today is a topic that we certainly cannot talk about without a lot of sensitivity involved. And I know that you were the perfect person to kind of enter into this space with me. So I appreciate you being here. But before we dive into the topic, would you just introduce yourself to everyone again and tell them what you do with The Reclaimed Home?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Aubrey, and my daughter and I, who's almost 16, we are The Reclaimed Home, and we help people reclaim their spaces, their time, so ultimately their lives, by working with their environment. And so we are both certified organizational specialists, and we declutter coach, we organize, we clean, and then we help people set up maintainable systems so that they can have a better life. So
I love it. I love the heart behind it. I think the mother-daughter team is the greatest. And for those of you who missed it, I will link Aubrey's first episode with me in the show notes. I forget the exact title of it, but it'll be in there. And she shared her incredibly unique living situation in her multi-generational home with her parents and in-laws and everybody's there, and how she manages that in such an intentional way, including the amount of stuff that they own versus what they share. It's a really fun episode. But today, we are going to be talking about if decluttering is only for those of us who are financially secure. And I want to start by saying that Aubrey and I have talked about this at length off air because we recognize that we're both sharing from a place of privilege, and Aubrey will share a little bit about her background. I want you guys to know that I grew up always having enough. We never wondered if there would be food on the table. I got to participate in almost any extracurricular activity that I wanted to. We had plenty of space in our home. So while Aubrey's going to be able to share her experience working with people who don't have as much privilege. It's important for us to acknowledge that this is not from firsthand experience, and we respect that there are nuances we may miss simply because we haven't experienced this on an emotional or physical level personally. So I just wanted to tell you about my background. And Aubrey, would you let everyone know kind of what your life has looked like?
Sure. And I so appreciate how you said that. It's exactly my heart behind this is although I've been privileged to work with a lot of our community who has let me into their homes and lives, and I hope to represent their stories well here. I have never had to wonder where my next meal is coming from. I did not have parents, even though I did grow up on, my dad was a pastor, and so we had a one-income family on a ministry budget, but still we always had enough. We didn't wonder where our next meal was coming from. We had a home. I've been a pastor's wife for 20 years now, and we live on a single income as well, which is why my daughter and I started this business. But we have a home, and there are people among my acquaintances that do consider me a little more financially strained, but I don't. And in the current devastation that we've seen too of everything that's happened in America with the hurricane and the fires, and then compared to the rest of the world, I consider myself greatly privileged. And so as I come here, I represent humbly the stories of the people I've worked with permission from them in an effort to just raise awareness and offer hope to anyone honestly, at any stage of life.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. And I couldn't agree more and respect you more. So with that said, would you share just kind of high level a little bit about the types of clients you've worked with over the years and kind of why you've been exposed to such a range of different people?
Sure. So before I do, I just want to say we've been welcomed into many homes and lives, and I just want to recognize the vulnerability first off that comes with that. Can be an extremely hard process to let somebody into your home and life, especially if you're not feeling good about your environment and if you're not feeling good about where you're at. So for anybody listening who feels any shame about their environment, I know, Shannon, I've heard you speak this so loud and clear from both the podcast and your Instagram, but our environments can tell us a lot of information, but they do not tell us our worth. And Shannon and I want to be your friends and believe you are amazing, uniquely created people, whether or not your home is tidy or messy, whether or not your home is cluttered or, decluttered. So I wanted to say that first off, and I appreciate every client who allows us the opportunity and privilege of walking alongside of them, learning from them, and then journeying with them to reclaim their home. So having said that, we've worked with a wide range, I would say, people that I would consider borderline hoarders to minimalists, people navigating neurodivergence in the form of ADHD, autism. The biggest category I would say of people we've worked with, I would put under the heading of navigating life after trauma. And I consider that such a privilege. Like I said, it's hard to let people in. And I think because of my unique position, first off, as a pastor's child, and now as a pastor's wife, we do have these amazing opportunities of when our community hits their darkest times, they let us in and we can go and we can minister to them and so, having said that, we do a lot of volunteer work here at the Reclaimed Home because when people hit that kind of trauma, a lot of times financial strain goes hand in hand with that, right? Trauma can look different for everyone. It can look like a job loss. It can look like being out of work for 4 years. It can look like a sudden loss of a spouse or a family member, those trying to recover from abuse. It can be those recovering from medical trauma who have months of very difficult journey ahead of them. And then, divorce recovery. And so these are all specific examples of things that we've been so privileged to step into. And I do think that's because of my husband's unique position, and we are so blessed to be able to do that.
Thank you for what you do, first of all, in your community. And it is, I've shared this before, and we talked about this, Aubrey, how Paring Down is not a Christian podcast, but my faith pops up often in what I share just because this is my podcast, so it's going to be a reflection of the things that are in my life and my examples and that kind of thing. And so I appreciate you sharing that background as well, because while we can help anyone, whatever your religious or, background is, or your beliefs or anything like that, it's really important to understand why you've been able to access so many different types of people. And that does come with ministry. So when you are in people's homes, what part of this idea that decluttering is just for the privileged, like what part of that is legitimate? And what part of that is a trap that actually further harms people who might not be financially secure?
Sure. So again, as we talk about this, I think maybe a lot of us would have different ideas of what it means to be privileged or underprivileged. So let's just keep that in mind. Hopefully we can give each other a lot of grace as we as we get into this. But I do wonder, the phrase that decluttering is just for the privileged, I wonder if those who hold that view would be thinking of decluttering along the lines of like a staunch minimalism or a rigid minimalism view where you can only have one plate per person in the house. And let me tell you, for the single parents that I work with who have to get their kids out the door, they're feeding them breakfast, all the plates would be dirty in the sink. They're getting the kids to school. They're picking them up after school. They're coming home. They're exhausted. Now they can't make dinner until they wash every plate in the sink. It doesn't leave, rigid minimalism does not leave much margin or flexibility for life. And I'm not against minimalism, but I certainly don't think that it's every single person, that is the choice for every single person. And at the Reclaimed Home, our goal is not to turn people into minimalists. And Shannon, I love your podcast. I point people to it all the time. It's my first recommendation because here you have such a realistic view and awareness, I feel like, of life, and you offer so much grace around it, and you recognize that we're all different and we all come from different situations and our brains all work differently. And so I do think that if we're talking about a staunch minimalism, I can see where people would definitely argue for that. I think there's a lot of legitimacy that that's not going to be for everyone. And the less resources you have, the less you can throw, if I'm very resourceful and I want to be a minimalist, that's awesome. I can hire people if I run out of energy or time, right? I could have a house cleaner come clean those plates while I'm at work, or I might not need to go to work or whatever. So there's just a lot more margin.
Yeah, 100%. Like I hear people when they say, I can't be a minimalist, maybe because of lifestyle, like you said, like we're running around and there just literally isn't time to wash the dishes in between or to do a load of laundry every single day, or with these things that we do suggest that are possible for almost any family, but not every family, right? Like that, They think that it feels like, oh, anyone can do this, because we forget how much privilege is interlaced if we are kind of more on the middle area of Western society, like that middle class to higher, of course. And I also hear people when they say, I can't afford to replace something, right? Yes. That's real. I hear you. And that can be a trap, right? Because then we hold on to so much that we don't get to experience the benefits of the freedom that comes of living in a home that doesn't bog us down. Can you speak to that trap a little bit?
Absolutely. I would love to. And I just want to clarify one more time that I think when you and I talk about decluttering, we're talking about clearing the clutter, things that no longer serve us. And that's so different, in my opinion, from staunch minimalism, as I said before. And it's more about how do you want to live your life? And it's true that we may all be able to do that at varying levels, but usually we all can find pieces of our lives that we can reclaim control of. And so we clear what's costing us more than it's giving us. And when you and I talk about decluttering, I think we're on the same page with that. And so foundationally then, decluttering is not just about having less stuff. It's about so much more. It's about intentional living. And so this idea of the what if, right? There's this idea that if I had more money, I could declutter more safely, right? Because there's less risk. If I need something, I can repurchase it. And I just want to say, I've worked with a lot of wealthy clients who really still struggle with this. And so it's interesting. I do think it's more of a mindset than it is an actual roadblock. And I say that because I've worked with people, and I'll share one of my clients' stories with permission here in a minute, maybe, who have worked through the what if, who are extremely underprivileged, and they've worked through it, and they have a great handle on how to declutter and what it means, more so than a lot of my wealthy clients that I've worked with. And so, yes, this what if idea, as you and I have talked a lot about it, it really does come down to, and I really loved your, psychological biases that you talked about. And it really just comes back to a lot of mindset, a lot of biases, a lot of those things that you mentioned, a lot of our past experiences, a lot of how we see stuff. And maybe we'll dig a little bit more into that. There's a lot going on in our brains, right?
Right.
And so it's complicated. It's layered.
It is. It's very layered is such a great word for it. And for those who don't know, Aubrey is referencing an episode I did about 5 psychological phenomena that affect decluttering and consumption. And in there, I talked about things like the sunk cost fallacy. You've held on to it for so long. You want to keep investing in it, thinking like eventually my time and space and money I've put into this will have been worth keeping it. One that is not mentioned in there, I think that really fits into this, is the confirmation bias. I saw a creator talking about this. I will try and find who they are so I can link it, because I always like to let people know that, I consume a lot of information. Not all of this is just from my own little brain, and I like to give credit where credit is due. But they were talking about how when we remember how we got rid of something and then we ended up needing it, that's part of confirmation bias, where we remember the things that confirm something we already believe. So we already believe that, you shouldn't be getting rid of something because what if you end up needing it? And then you remember all of the stuff that you got rid of in the past, perhaps, that you did end up needing. And that's confirmation bias, instead of remembering that you can't remember, ironically, all of the things that you've gotten rid of that you've never needed. Those things don't really come to mind anymore. You can barely remember what they are, even though that circumstance is much more common than those few times that you did need something again.
Yes.
And I also did that episode about getting past the money wasted when decluttering. And something I brought up that I think feeds into this is that there's this idea that I'm going to hold on to everything in case I need it. But then when you hold on to so much, you don't know where anything is anymore anyway. Right. And you often make those repeat purchases more even than those who have decluttered, and waste more money on repeat purchases because you cannot easily access or remember what you are storing in your house. So to me, that's part of the trap here. Why might underprivileged, again, using that word very loosely, people have more belongings than those with financial security, though?
Sure. And I do feel like with your psychology background, you can probably speak a lot better to the layers. But I would love to speak from just experience that I've had. Yes,
please, pop in there,
so
girl.
That's what I experienced. So barriers for somebody who is underprivileged would be along the lines that we just talked about. Fear of needing it someday is huge, and not being able to get it. And also, and I say this with, again, this is really nuanced here, but a lot of the people I work with who are underprivileged, even if they're not underprivileged, if you look at stuff and in your head you see a dollar sign, if your stuff is synonymous with money, it is going to be extremely difficult for you to let go of it, especially if you feel that you don't have enough money. So if you are strained financially, but all of your things are synonymous with money in your head, that's a huge barrier for people to get over. And of course, we know that, a book isn't money. Could I potentially sell it for a little money? Yes, but there's just a whole bunch of layers within that. And also looking at stuff as security. And stuff does give us security to a certain level. And we'll get to that because there's a lot of importance in our belongings and they are very special. But when it's our ultimate security, if we are feeling insecure in our life, perhaps we're out of a job or we already don't feel like we have enough, that scarcity mindset, it's really difficult at that point for anyone to let go of things. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it totally answers why people with less money would have more stuff, even though that feels
Yeah.
counterintuitive. You think, well, they can't afford as much stuff, but they
Right.
keep more. And then even when it comes to acquiring more, have you found that those you've worked with who have less money are more apt to acquire free items?
That's a great question. I actually don't
No.
see a huge disparity. I see maybe it's because the people I work with all are struggling with clutter, but
Mm.
I'm seeing across the board people struggling to get rid of things, whether they're extremely privileged, and I mean extremely privileged, some of these people I've worked with, or extremely underprivileged. So I am kind of seeing it across the board. So I do think
Yeah.
it really comes down to this mindset of like, what do we believe stuff is?
Mm.
And
Yeah. I asked
yeah,
that because, like, I feel like there's this sense I could imagine that if you don't have much, then anytime anyone offers something for free, you would be like, yeah, I'm going to get my hands on that, or anytime you see a sale, you're like, oh, this is a really good deal. I'm going to
okay,
buy it. And
yes.
then you acquire more and more.
Okay, the sale, especially for my underprivileged clients, especially because when you have less money, you just know, like, I don't have enough to go around anyway, so I need to get it while it's on sale. So there's a lot of that urgency. Yes, definitely with the sale items for sure.
Okay, yeah, I figured, but you're the one that has the experience here. Yeah, and urgency, gosh, that's a great word for it.
Yes,
And urgency is wrapped up in that lack of security, right? Because you're
right,
thinking,
right.
this might be the only time I can get this good of a deal on it, or this might be the only time I see it for free on Facebook Marketplace, or someone's offering me these hand-me-downs, and I need to take it now, even though they're offering me hand-me-downs for my kid who is, they're size 7 hand-me-downs. My kid is only 4, but I should take them because I need to hold on to them because in 3 years they might come in really handy. And then the next thing you know, you just have so much stuff that you're storing in your
Right.
house out of the
Absolutely.
urgency, right?
Absolutely. And I
Mm.
have found many clients there. And it's at that point when I come in, usually they're at the point where they're realizing, okay, clutter costs me. Clutter is not free. I do not feel freedom with this. I do not feel safe anymore. I feel completely burdened. I hear a lot like, I can't breathe in my house. I feel like I'm drowning. I hear people who don't even want to go home.
Mm.
They just literally try to avoid home at all costs because it feels so stifling. And so to go back to that, is decluttering just for the privileged? I strongly assert that it's for all persons, because and I would even strongly assert, especially for those of us when we hit the heart of life, because it's in the heart of life, whether you've lost a job and so you're financially strained, or you are recovering medically so you have hardly any energy, or you are recovering from trauma so your brain has less brain space. All of these things, we have a finite amount of brain space and time and energy. And so I really strongly am so passionate that decluttering is especially for those of us, and I throw myself into this category, who are recovering from trauma of some sort, or who are hitting the heart of life, because it's at that point that you need less to manage, that I want less
Mm.
to manage. Right. And so my clients who, hit a single parent, they're like, I don't have time anymore to just clean all day. I want to be with my kids, So, yeah.
That's a great point. That's when you need it the most, is during those
Yeah.
hardest moments.
Yes.
And do you have, I know you do, a specific story that comes to mind of a client who reaped the benefits of decluttering that you're talking about, even though they did not have financial security?
I do, and I'm so glad you asked this because, and I mean, I have several, but I have permission to share one, the specific one that I'm going to today. Because a few weeks ago, as I knew I was coming on here, I called one of my clients who has seen both sides of this. I would consider her very privileged at bringing in over $300,000 a year. She gave me permission to share all this money, finance talk, and then going from an extremely traumatic situation to being a single parent and bringing in less than 20,000 a year.
Whoa.
That swing, she talked to me for over an hour and a half, and it was just the most beautiful conversation, because we have worked with her now for a couple of years. When the trauma happened, I do want people listening, if you're in the heart of life and you have like trauma brain or life is just unmanageable, sometimes decluttering is actually really difficult to do at that moment. So what we do for a lot of our clients who are in this space is we will go in, and with her, we packed away as much as possible, didn't get rid of much at first, simplified her immediate environment as much as possible so that it could promote healing. So there could be brain space as she learned to navigate life as a single mom with several children, trying to grab whatever work she could at whatever time was available between kids. Very, very difficult, painful situation. And we're so blessed to work with her and that she allowed us into her home and life. So going from what she did, which I would consider privilege, to this, it was fascinating to hear her talk. And I'd love to just share a few quotes if I can.
Please. Yes. Wow. Thanks for calling her. That is
yes. Oh,
going the extra mile.
I just thought, man, she can really speak to this so well. She said, being from somebody who went through this income change, she had to go to a church and ask them to pay a gas bill. Like she could literally not pay bills. So she's choosing between bills. You wonder where food's coming from. She's applying for food stamps. But she said that this was just so much mindset work, and it really, decluttering and simplifying her immediate environment really helped her heal from the trauma that she went through. And she said, we think she's decluttered about 50 to 60% of her house, and she's still going. And this made me so happy. She said, Aubrey, you've worked yourself out of a job, which is always my goal with clients, to empower them, to educate them, to teach them so that they can just reclaim. Honestly, that's why we call it the reclaim tone. They can reclaim their life and be intentional and make their own decisions going forward. But she said, I literally don't remember the stuff I've gotten rid of. Can't tell you one thing. And then she said, coming back to the financial piece, training to live with less is what saves you money in the long run. And so she said, especially for people who are financially strained, if you don't have money, like learning, she said, when I think about capsule wardrobe, now I'm not talking about the capsule wardrobe where you have to go out and buy 40 pieces of clothing that all work together. But when you learn to live with less, even less clothes, you just stop bringing in more clothing. And so she kept throwing out all these examples. And she said, decluttering was still the thing that brought me the most buoyancy and during this time. And I thought that was fascinating. I said, how so? And she said, oh, in every way, logistically, emotionally. She said, now she can sit on the couch with her kids and snuggle them. And so what we see here is somebody who was able to make intentional decisions. I should go back and mention that after 6 months, we would go back with her when she had more brain space. We would schedule times when she knew she would have that time and brain space, and we would go back and work with her through her stuff. And so we've taken van loads for her to donations and things like that. So she has, in this process, in these couple years, decluttered 50 to 60% of her belongings, at least, I would say. It's kind of hard to have a handle on that sometimes. But she chose, I don't want to stuff manage with my limited time. I don't want to be cleaning all the time. I'm exhausted. I'm a single mom trying to keep life working, and I love my kids and I'm passionate about them, and I want to sit on the couch and snuggle them and read to them. And I just loved that she was willing to share all of this with me and what decluttering has and simplifying has allowed her to do. So thank you for letting me share that. I'm so passionate. These are the stories that keep us going, right? That are like, right, we want everyone to taste of that freedom.
Totally. Thank you for sharing that and her story. And thank you for building that relationship with her, that she was entrusted you with that story so that it can help so many other people, hopefully, who are listening here today, and just other people that you reach with your influence as well. And what I was hearing there is so true, that not only does it give you that freedom to focus on what matters in life, no matter how much money you have, right? You love your kids, whether you have $10 in the bank or $1 million in the bank,
Exactly.
And so it gives you that freedom, but then also saves you so much money moving forward when you
Yes.
have a new relationship with belongings. Like she said, you're not as tempted to buy the next thing because you are used to not having it and you recognized that it's not worth the space and time in your home. And so just imagine the amount of money you save moving forward when
Yes.
you know, really reevaluate your belongings. Hey guys, it's time for your ad break. Each week I like to say a huge thank you for your graciousness that these are part of the podcast. Here we go. You know, listen, there's nuance to this phrase that quote,
Absolutely.
stuff doesn't matter. I've been thinking about it a lot lately with the LA fires. For those of you listening, we are recording during the fires are still happening. God willing, by the time this comes out in February, they will not be happening, but it is top of mind right now. And it's so important to remember that saying stuff doesn't matter is so irresponsible in the face of people who have lost everything. But there is some truth to it, right? Like there's just nuance here. So Aubrey, would you speak to that? In what way does stuff matter? And in what way does it not matter?
Absolutely. And I'm going to tie this back to a couple experts in the field. I would consider Matt Paxton, somebody I really look up to and have read a lot of his resources because he works with clients who have tons of items. And he says it so beautifully when he says our stuff is connected to a lifetime of memories. Okay. So his book, Keep the Memories, Lose the Stuff, was awesome. And he doesn't talk about getting rid of every single thing, of course, but it is so connected to memories. And I'd like to bring up, you know, I'm again so privileged to work with clients. And when a single mom who's lost her spouse recently holds up a onesie of her kid who will never fit into that onesie again, but says, "This was the last time my family was whole." It is such a great reminder of our humanness and that our items really do represent memories and experiences and love that we've had that may no longer be available to us. And so stuff does matter. I thought Katie Joy Wells said it so beautifully recently when she said, these, you know, items are anchors to the life we've lived and to the people we've loved. And they're a connection to a life once lived. Our items hold our stories even when the moment they have represented has passed. And so in that way, I hope we can all recognize that stuff really does, it has a lot of meaning to it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because the sentimentality in our items is not superfluous. We can recognize, you know, and I've shared this in my sentimental items episode when I talked about going through my mom's stuff. We can recognize that those memories do exist without the stuff. Like they were still a family, whether or not that onesie existed. My mom was still my mom, whether or not I have her items, right? So there's that balance there, but there's still power in saying, I'm not going to keep all of the sentimental items, but I can hold on to the ones that have the most meaning and feel good about that and not feel like it's superfluous because gosh, you're right. That sentence or that statement by Katie Joy Wells, and I'll link her information in the show notes too, just a shout out to her. And saying that they're anchors. What a great word for that. You know, it just brings you back. It keeps you steady in the moment that it represents. And that is powerful. Now, on the flip side, in what way does stuff not matter?
Yes. And I've so appreciated you sharing your journey because when you experience a loss as young as you did and as dear as you did, and then you've walked through it all these years. I love learning from you. And so I think exactly what you said, when the items are gone, the love is still there. Those experiences aren't gone. They're not erased from our memory. So yeah, there's an ache there, right? But possessions aren't the memory, which is wonderful. But each of us in our own way will grieve differently. And I've just really appreciated you sharing your own personal journey, going through your mom's items. I think that's just so valuable.
Thank you. And, you know, something else I was thinking along the same lines, you know, we covered the sentimental piece. I think that's top of mind right now, of course. But you mentioned the security too. And when it comes to saying that stuff doesn't matter, how does it matter in terms of security?
I think it's really special and a great privilege to know that my kids have, we live in Michigan. I should show you the outside right now. We're like under 6 inches of snow, that my kids have a coat and that they're prepared for life and that they have clothing. So stuff represents being prepared for life and being able to be secure in knowing that, again, just like food, like we don't have to sit here and worry about where our next meal comes from. And that is such a privilege. And so we can turn our focus to other things like education, and we can turn our focus to passions, because we don't have to spend our whole life hunting and gathering under 6 inches of snow to try to find some rabbit, and that's just not always been the case for humankind. That's not the case for a lot of people in other countries right now, and especially for people who have experienced significant loss lately. So yeah, I do totally agree with you that stuff represents security and being prepared for life.
I love that. And it's true. I mean, even when we're talking about those who are financially insecure, to an extent, if you're listening to this podcast, you have the bandwidth to consider growth in your life. And there's privilege wrapped up in that too, because, there's plenty of people who are so strapped for survival's sake that they do not have that mental bandwidth you're talking about to seek out growth and change in their life. It's just surviving day after day. And so the security of items, like you said, it helps us move through the world, and literally survive and be able to do that. And it gives us the ability to seek things of kind of a deeper quality in our lives.
Yes.
And then thinking about the flip side too, once again, when we're talking about why stuff doesn't matter, can you speak to the idea that stuff matters, the false idea that stuff matters for happiness, or that it represents success? When people are saying, I want the big house, I want to own all the nice things, that view of stuff, I think, is more so what we're talking about when we say stuff doesn't matter. Would you expand on that a bit?
Absolutely. And I guess for me, this comes a lot down to my faith again, but you can also look at, scientific studies and psychology, and the fact that as Americans' possessions have gone up, so has anxiety, overwhelm, and depression. Stuff is clearly not making us happy. I would argue, at least there's a lot of nuance in there too, but I really believe that we are human beings created for connection and love with God and each other. And I have never felt satisfied with stuff. Oh, it can bring me momentary pleasure, and that's so fun. I think that's great. I certainly don't think stuff is bad, but it's never going to make me ultimately happy. And as we see, there's just great examples and stories of people who do chase their whole life after money and the better house and the things, and get to the end of their life and they feel like it's so empty and meaningless. So I think stuff is wonderful. I think it can aid us. I love how creative people are in making it, designing it. There's a lot of appreciation I have for what it represents as a civilization, how far we've come. And again, for the artists behind everything and the design minds, but it's not our ultimate security and happiness.
100%. I think the trap is when people equate stuff with status, and that status will bring a level of happiness, or it's just the excess, right? Like you said, stuff is good and does bring happiness when we have a bed to sleep in and a roof over our heads, right? That increases happiness, studies show. But when you get beyond that, the excess stuff is not necessary. And I can speak to this a little bit just because I'm moving with the military. In fact, by the time this comes out, I can share this news that have I told you yet, Aubrey?
No, where are you going?
We just found out 2 days ago. We're moving to Kodiak, Alaska, which is crazy. It's even more remote than Ketchikan. We've lived in Ketchikan, Alaska. So we are, comfortable with the idea of Alaska, but we might as well be in a different state. I looked up the mileage from Ketchikan to Kodiak, and it's the same distance as where I live in Florida to my parents' house in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I mean, it's huge. Alaska, I mean, people forget how huge it is. So people might be like, oh, you're going back to Alaska, you know? And I'm like, it's not the same. It's very different. And Kodiak is even more remote than Ketchikan, which is saying a lot. There's 5,000 people, and it's you know, I'm still wrapping my head around it. I can't even get a full sentence out about that. But anywho, the point is that even from Ketchikan to here in Florida, and now as we are considering all the logistics of moving back to Alaska, I have realized what it's like to live somewhere where you have access to a lot of stuff and bigger homes, newer homes, and just all the stuff that offers versus living in Alaska where you can't do Amazon overnight deliveries. And maybe the barge will stop on the island and maybe bad weather will keep it away. And there's no meat or produce for a couple of weeks, you know, and I've already lived that. It's going to be even more extreme in Kodiak, and the housing, it's like, you know, beggars can't be choosers. You get what you get. I think we're going to live on base in Kodiak, but in Ketchikan, we lived in, you know, a much smaller home. And it was a beautiful home. Don't get me wrong. I will take a view any day over fancier finishes, you know, but we are now in a much larger home, almost twice the size that we lived in Ketchikan, and much newer and in a neighborhood that's much more, you know, whatever you would consider a wealthier neighborhood. And it has not affected my well-being, my happiness, my sense of anything. Really, it hasn't affected anything, you know, other than I have to clean more. Frankly, I need to go back to a smaller house. And so I just wanted to share that, you know,
I feel that.
You just have what you need. And that is the key when it comes to stuff. But the excess, more than you need, you know, is just not going to bring you any heightened level of happiness. And I'm reminding myself of that as we move back to the land of nothing. Okay, though, let's talk about making some money off of possessions. And for those who struggle financially, I would imagine that is a route that they usually want to take. If they're going to be decluttering, there's this idea of wanting to sell it to make some money. So what support or ideas do you offer in helping your clients find a way to do that? And what traps do you want to make sure that they avoid in the selling process?
Yes. Great question. I wish we could offer more support. What I do is the first thing I encourage my clients to do is, can you get somebody else to do it? Do you have a friend, a neighbor, a sister, a mom who can sell your things on Facebook Marketplace or wherever and then give you the money for that? Can they just do that as a gift for you? Do you have somebody who can drop by and take your items to a consignment shop for you and give you the money? Anything I can do to get this off my client's plate, because it's an additional cost. You know, the items are costing them. I mean, I don't know about you, but I barely sell anything online because of the, it just creates a lot of overwhelm for me. I'm not in a neighborhood. I can't just stick it out on my front porch. There's a lot. I have to drive into town, depending on where my clients are around here. It can be a lot, and it can be a lot to manage if you're already overwhelmed, especially if you're recovering from some kind of trauma. So that's always my first go-to. Can you have someone else do it? If not, totally get that. Someday, my husband and I, our dream is to create a foundation where we can offer all kinds of support to people. And that would be one thing we'd love to offer to people, would be financial help in these situations. But the second thing is trying to educate about the endowment effect. I believe you also talked about this in the 5 Psychological Biases episode that I referenced earlier, trying to help my clients understand. And we've seen it on reality shows, right? When they hold up an item that's stained or ripped or damaged, and they think they're going to get a lot of money for it, that's hard because you're not going to get money for it. So there's a bit of an education process that I try to gently. I'm so sorry if you can hear my dog.
Oh, it's okay. This is a dog-friendly show. Listen, the amount of times my listeners have heard my dog way more than they want to. At this point, we are just a pet-friendly show.
Pet-friendly. There we go. So trying to gently educate about that. Otherwise, what I do is I try to encourage them, okay, so you already know that you feel like you're drowning in your home, and I know that you're aware of the cost that this item is giving you, not only in space, but in stress and overwhelm. And you want it out of your sight, because we all have probably heard by, well, maybe I shouldn't say we all, but a lot of us have heard by now the silent to-do list concept by Fumio Sasaki and his book, Goodbye Things, that when we look around, our brain is pinged. Oh, that's right. I have to sell that on Facebook Marketplace. Oh, there's a pile of laundry I have to do. Oh, I have to do the dishes. All these kinds of things. So if you already have limited brain space, my clients start to recognize this is taking it up. So I do encourage a date. You need money real bad. Awesome. If it hasn't sold in what, a month, or do we need to give it 3 for the financial? Okay, fine. And we have at random times been able to try to sell things for people. It's really hard to sell stuff. We're not always able to get that money for clients. But yeah, those are my tips for people. Again, everyone's situation is so unique, but finding anybody who can help you is my number one go-to. I'm serious. Go to a downtown shelter, go to a random church if you don't have a church, and ask for help. People are here to help, and I want to get people the help they need during these hard times.
I love what you said about setting a boundary, a time boundary with yourself, and say, okay, if it doesn't sell in 3 months, it's time to let it go, and to not let the selling process hold you back from all the benefits we've talked about here that you deserve to have to kind of lighten that mental to-do list like you're talking about. And that goes even more so, as you've said, for people who are going through a hard time in life. Because right now, my guest room has stuff that we decluttered recently, kid toys, things that are like we constantly have to assess what we own. And it's hanging over my head. I have it written down on our whiteboard on the fridge, like go to, the CAC, which is the Children's Advocacy Center. I bring stuff to, or like do a Goodwill. I have it written out where I want to take things, and I have to do it. And it's on my to-do list, and it's driving me crazy. And I am in a place of privilege. Like, I can't imagine how overwhelming that is when you are a single parent, or when you don't have money or time to go somewhere and drop it off, or to try and sell it, or, all of those things. So I really appreciate that boundary, saying let's not let that hold us back from living in a home we deserve to live in. And on that note, I want to finish with this question. When someone lets go of their excess, no matter their financial situation, how does that empower them?
Oh man, this is why I do this job, right? This is why we're so privileged to do it. The sky's the limit here. I mean, I see people, right? People lose a ton of weight. People use all their time to be with their kids. Like I shared the one story. People have time to go to job interviews and get a job. People have time to invest in passions and dreams, or simply heal. They can get out of bed easier in the morning. They're so thankful for so much less time cleaning. Honestly, I hear people, I don't have to tidy. I don't have to spend hours tidying anymore. You have all that time to do what you want to with it. And I hear that from across the board, privileged, underprivileged. When you get rid of stuff, you have that much stuff less to clean, fix, manage. You have reclaimed all of that time. So exciting. What are you going to use it for? And I love to watch people. I had a client just tell me, you made space for creativity to blossom. And I mean, she did as well, right? But she was just so thrilled. So, sky's the limit. What are your passions? Maybe you need brain space to even remember who you are and what you like to do. Maybe you just need brain space to heal. So sky's the limit. I'm so passionate about it, helping everyone. And I know you are too, because in a lot of your episodes, you talk about, I want to help people live to their fullest potential, their most intentional life. And it's not in a pressure way. It's like, you are an awesome, unique human being. And I'm so happy you're on this planet. What gifts do you want to invest in? How do you want to invest in yourself? It's just so exciting to me.
Yes, it's so empowering to not only like reap that benefit of time back, to say, oh my gosh, now I can go out and spend time on these other things in life. But the process itself is also, I think, super empowering. You're saying, I'm no longer going to let this stuff, or the fear, the scarcity mindset, the fear of what if I have to replace it, all of those things that hold us back, Instead, you're making the empowered choice that no, I am going to choose what matters in my home, let go of the excess. And in that process, it gives us that energy you've shared about. It gives us that sense of just agency, and I think that's really empowering to say the stuff isn't controlling me. I'm going to control the stuff. I decide. I get to decide. And I think for those who maybe don't have as much financially or have gone through a lot of trauma, to be able to have that sense of control in a healthy manner,
huge,
very valuable. Very
huge.
valuable.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You're right. We're moving from victim mentality to agency. And some of my clients have been thrilled. They feel like they're even learning decision making along with the self-awareness that it's bringing. I mean, you're right. There are just so many empowering things that reclaiming your environment gives you. Yeah.
Love it. Well, Aubrey, let's end on the questions I ask everybody that you've answered in the past, and I want to hear where you are right now. So what is something you are currently paring down?
Sure. Well, in our home, we're doing pretty well, but I'm still making rounds. And as you've talked about before, decluttering is kind of like an onion. And as you live with less, you realize you could even live with less. And I'm all about that right now as my kids are high school age and I love them so much, but we live with a lot of people and I want as much time as I can to pour into others and into my job. So still, like, the physical things in my house that you might see on Instagram are, under the sink, my bathroom, our laundry room. We don't have a basement or anything. So stuff can tend to get put in there. And then just, there's a lot of different ways that we can declutter. And you've mentioned before on the show, unhealthy relationships, scheduling commitments. So I am also working on decluttering my inner critic, if you're familiar with that. So negative thinking and just reframing a lot of wonderful things that, I have so much to be grateful for. So.
I love that. Thank you. That I'm glad you touched on both the literal and that more internal piece of paring down. And what's something that you're currently looking forward to?
Yes. Well, I've been working with my business coach and I am just really thankful for my job. I know you really enjoy your work too. And we're recording this at the end of a week. And this weekend we get to go help 2 clients. So just so thankful for this job and just always hopeful and praying that we can be a blessing to people, bring light and hope. And just love that. Love what we get to do. So.
What a gift, right? To be able to look forward to what you do for a living. I look forward to every interview. I look forward to researching for my solo episodes. Like I look forward to making reels. Like it's such a gift. I'm glad you feel that as well. And where can everyone find your services online, follow you on social media, anything that you want to share here at the end to help people find you and what you offer?
The best place probably is either email or Instagram. So at Instagram, we are the.reclaimed.home.co. So sorry for that. It's the Reclaimed Home Co., but it's hard to read. So there's dots separating the words. And that's where, there's a link there to my stand store with some free resources. You will see a lot of my stuff starting out with baby steps, like 5 minutes a day or even one item at a time, especially to help people who are in trauma brain. We just can't focus for more than 5 minutes at a time if you're struggling to function in real life, right? But I want to give resources for you to start buying back your life and your time. So the free resources on my stand store to help you start with either one item at a time, 5 minutes at a time. What is that?
For those who are watching on YouTube,
that's amazing.
Isn't that funny?
Did I just do a hand motion?
You must have done some hand motion. All of a sudden on her screen, you guys, on your screen, there was this big thumbs down hand motion, and we were both like, what's happening? Sorry for that distraction.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, so your Instagram, what's your email address?
Email is thereclaimedhomeco@gmail.com. So,
okay, I'll make sure that both of those are in the show notes so
wonderful.
You guys can easily access that. And of course, when this comes out, everyone, there's always a teaser reel on my Instagram page at pairing, and there's no I in pair, pairing_down. And I will have Aubrey's accounts tagged there as well if it's easier for you just to go to Instagram. And just thank you so much, Aubrey, for your sensitivity and vulnerability and your, market research in a sense, like calling the people you've worked with, just making this such an intentional conversation before we even started. I just appreciate your spirit so much.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for having me.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.